Hi, good morning, and thank you for joining our webinar today on the importance of transparency in programmatic marketing. My name is Ayan Mohammed, and I'm the European Marketing Manager for DataXu, and I sit in our lovely London office. And today I'll be your moderator for the session. All webinar attendees have automatically been placed on mute today, but if you do have any questions during the session, please do write them in the questions box as we set aside some time at the end to answer some of your questions. And with that, I'd like to hand you over to your presenter today, Martin Brown.
Thanks, Diane. Hello, everyone, and welcome. So we wanted to address the issues around transparency today. Obviously, it's a bit of a hot topic. So just to outline the agenda for everyone, we're going to give a little bit of a market overview, so give some specific context around DataXu and why we are talking about this topic. We'll look at transparency, what it actually means, the kind of what, why, and how of transparency, because as we'll see, it can mean different things, I think, to different groups and organizations. We'll talk about some of the issues and challenges that are currently pervasive within the market and how those relate specifically to transparency. And to Ian's point as well, we will leave time at the end for questions. So if questions do arise during the presentation, please feel free to address those, and we will come to them at the end. So, the context of this and the way that we would really view the world at DataXu is that we have consumers now who live in an omnichannel world. Consumers have a greater amount of utility over their lives than they ever have done before because of the way they're able to access content via multiple devices. So from a marketing perspective, DSPs, technologies must be able to optimize, analyze, and evaluate across these channels. Consumers engage with digital ads and perform various actions across channels. Their behavior starts to leave a digital trail of data, which marketers can follow. We now normally call this trail big data, which I'm sure everyone on this call has at least a passing familiarity with. It's a term that gets used quite a lot nowadays. What this does really for marketers is create an opportunity to better understand their customers on a one-to-one basis and to use digital advertising as real-time consumer research. Marketers can do this by leveraging programmatic marketing platforms like DataXu to build out and report against trends that will tell insightful stories about consumer behavior. They start to build more of a person-to-person or one-to-one at least dialogue with their consumers. DataXu has built out channel and device-specific capabilities because we believe programmatic marketing enables more customer-centric marketing and cross-channel platforms can engage the consumer across multiple devices. We're currently working on technology development as well that will allow for more persistent identification across devices. This remains a significant challenge in the industry. So these conversations become more holistic, more sequential, and ultimately more meaningful. However, in the context of today's topic, what does this mean? I think essentially what this means is that advertisers are demanding more transparency. As we move into a marketing world that is powered by highly sophisticated technologies that should give marketers more control than ever over the execution of their digital marketing programs. So we see the advertisers themselves are demanding greater transparency than they've ever had before. It sounds unusual to say, but getting the exact ability to see what is being bought. This can be defined as advertisers understanding their media plans better, but as outlined in this slide, really focusing on a couple of key areas. Transparency about the attributes of an impression at the data level, and understanding the end-to-end economics of all impressions purchased. It really means a more complete view of digital media execution, which, although perhaps perceived to have existed before, hasn't always been the case. So we're seeing certain areas of the industry come together and start to cluster around this idea of transparency to address issues like arbitrage. The slide here speaks to the American Association of Advertising Agencies, their recent endorsement for programmatic marketing, and their belief that we're starting to move towards a more automated age. We're already seeing this with the adoption of technologies by agencies and marketers, but they are now starting to address the issues of establishing best practice around dealing with things like media arbitrage and obviously the issue of transparency itself. Part of this will be undoubtedly facilitated by automation of the media buying process, but we expect this to ramp up more significantly over the coming years. As the 4A's article says, the industry could be fully automated from a media buying perspective within this 5-year time bracket. But this really speaks to the adoption of technology facilitating change within the industry. So what this means essentially is that media buying towards greater automation and ultimately transparency. What this slide really shows is a quick glimpse under the hood of the DataXu platform to provide marketers with a more complete analytical view of the media buying process and potentially allowing advertisers a lot greater transparency than they've ever had before. Advertisers now are using custom algorithmic optimization to make better purchasing decisions on their media and to assign a willingness to pay to each impression. However, without the transparency of understanding what's driving this performance, what's driving these marketing outcomes, a lot of this can become irrelevant information. So we need to make sure this information is surfaced to marketers as they move through their marketing programs. However, one key point to remember here is what we're not just talking about in the transparency perspective is media buying. Obviously, there is huge relevance to the transparency around media buying. There still exists a lot of opacity in certain areas of the market. But what we're also talking about is agencies and brands working with a technology partner who can collect and normalize data. The ultimate thinking here is that data belongs to the marketer. And this transparency, not just on end-to-end media buying, but data ownership is rightly a hot topic at the moment. We're seeing brands demand ownership, control, and access to their data. And this is becoming the key decision maker in the driver around making technology adoption decisions. The need to have data aggregated into a single technology where it is becoming not only available to them but also actionable is becoming paramount. And again, from a DataXu view of the world, this really is the hot topic at the moment, this idea of actionable data, this idea that the ownership of data is key, but also the ability to execute that data across marketing activities is becoming paramount, as we said. So data should be actionable, and it should be available to the brand, but this is becoming increasingly pertinent because we're seeing a significant change in the market. If programmatic was originally the first iteration of open exchange media buying, so media bought by exchanges with no predetermined media partners, we're now seeing a shift. We're seeing private exchange media buys, which is a potentially one-to-one relationship with the publisher facilitated by technology on both sides, or guaranteed media buys as well. Whereas a direct relationship between the programmatic partner or DSP and the publisher as well. We are increasingly seeing the need for technology to be able to fulfill all these parts of the media plan. Just being able to buy exchange-traded media is no longer enough for brands as we move through the different phases of programmatic. They want to be able to buy media at scale and across media buys at scale across private exchange inventory, direct and guaranteed. But this will in turn facilitate greater levels of transparency, which we'll come on to talk about a little bit. We're moving to a phase now where transparency is being facilitated by changes in the market, moving away from just open exchange buys, which some vendors have historically it's been easily to make those opaque. We're moving to more transparent buys as we move into this world of private exchanges and guaranteed media. So, what we talk about when we talk about transparency? Well, as we said, it's a hot topic. For want of a better term, it's a buzzword, and we feel that we can break this really down into 4 key areas. If you're responsible for media planning or buying within an organization, you've probably been hearing a lot about transparency recently. Especially in this space, I think traditionally exchange-bought media, as we said, has been somewhat opaque. The term black box has been bandied around a lot for the first iteration of programmatic marketing when it's working with some vendors. You don't get to see domains that media is run across. You don't get to see the overall effective cost per thousand of media impressions. Really has lacked transparency in any way, shape or form. So we wanted to get to the crux today of understanding what transparency means, because as we said at the top of the presentation, as the 4A's piece in Ad Age said a couple of weeks ago, it can mean different things to different people, and the industry is starting to standardize around what terms define transparency for marketers and advertisers. So we've synthesized it down into 4 key points: price, media, management, and tactic. These are really the key areas that we focus in on. So to give a headline view of these, transparency on price means giving agency teams or teams who are involved in media buying the best view into media budgets and the end-to-end economics of that media budget. So it's moving away from this idea of fixed CPMs somehow being price transparency. Unless that's on upfront, guaranteed, or direct buys, then fixed CPMs don't really represent transparency as we see it. Media transparency is about full domain or site level reporting, includes impressions, clicks, actions, etc. But again, it's this idea that if you're executing a media plan, you should have full visibility on what's driving that media plan and what's facilitating the delivery across that media plan. Tactic transparency. Again, and this will be a theme that comes back a number of times in the presentation, it almost seems unusual that these things aren't being made now at the moment to agencies and brands, but they're not in some purchase cycles. So tactic transparency is about understanding which are the tactics, such as prospecting, retargeting, what is spending, what is performing, what is scaling. It's about getting a better understanding of the way that media is being executed and what tactics are driving those marketing outcomes for better delivery for the business. And management transparency as well. So coming to the fourth pillar, this is about getting confirmation that campaign setup and targeting requirements are being met. So really the fact that campaigns are being executed the way they're intended to be by the marketer and by the agency. The percentage of budget is being allocated, let's say, to retargeting that you want allocated to retargeting. Really what we're talking about here is getting greater accuracy of information around campaign management. Make sure that information is surfaced and you're able to report on it. So what I want to do now is really dive into these in a little more and just talk a little more detail about these four pillars, if you like, of transparency. I think probably the most straightforward or the one that everyone should expect minimally is price transparency. But unfortunately, as we see in this industry, sometimes it remains elusive. Buyers really should have a comprehensive understanding of the economics of media transactions. Arbitrage, fixed CPMs, as we discussed, on programmatic campaigns from certain vendors does not represent transparency in all instances. This is essentially because if vendors are buying on a dynamic CPM and charging on a fixed CPM, it's just a way of incorporating and capturing extra margin. It's not delivering the full benefit of programmatic marketing. So increasingly this idea of arbitrage is becoming very, very apparent that this is what transparency is not. We want to move away from fixed CPM campaigns from vendors who are claiming to deliver the benefits of programmatic. And how you move towards transparency is obviously looking to get beyond this idea of fixed CPMs, moving beyond the arbitrage model essentially. Media transparency. Again, it almost seems unusual to have to say, but how much of your budget is paying for actual media impressions and how much is going towards what we'd essentially call add-ons. This could be data measurement services, etc. We do have real-world examples, unfortunately, of up to 50% of budgets being lost. So only 50% of a media IO is actually going towards media. The rest is lost in the world of markup and margin. So you should be able to evaluate media costs separately from services and platform or technology fees so that you know how much of your media budget is actually buying working media. Again, it sounds like it should be hygiene, but a large amount of buys from some programmatic, in inverted commas almost, vendors still remain black box with no more insight into what actually occurred on the media execution, but the number of impressions and the CPM cost. This really doesn't represent transparency. This bundled, opaque media packages are really not what we would see as a fully transparent model. We don't want to be too alarmist, but again, a real-world example in the top right-hand corner there. A team within an agency asks for domain label reporting on a campaign they run, and they get a bribe instead. Sorry, I didn't mean bribe, I meant gift instead from that provider. And really, that's a world we want to move away from. It's definitely not transparency, I guess, in our book. Tactic transparency. So again, we've discussed this already, but to dig into it in a little bit more detail, it's moving away from the black box. Tactic transparency is not only knowing that your campaign is working, but also what's making it work. This is critical for a couple of reasons. Obviously, there's insight transfer, so as you move potentially between vendors and reporting back insight to businesses, it's critical to understand what's happening. But also, it's an extension of this idea we talked about at the top of the presentation, this idea of using digital media as an extension of market research. If you can't get that insight level information, then it's very, very difficult to leverage your digital media as research. So we want to know which targeting tactics or line items are working on a campaign. Media planners should ultimately have the right to understand exactly how each portion of your media budget is being allocated. It's a key tool to know that things like, from more dubious practices, things like cookie bombing to win attribution, and all these kind of things that we do hear the unfortunate stories about within the industry aren't taking place and really undermining your broader strategy. One thing to call out here as well, in the top right-hand corner again, this idea of artificial intelligence. Now, with computer learning, artificial intelligence, there is an element of this taking place when technology is by. I think what we're more talking about here is this idea that artificial intelligence is used as window dressing to cover up what's actually being done manually in the back end to the benefit perhaps not always of the advertiser, but perhaps more to the vendor as well. And management transparency. This one, when we've discussed it before with customers, sometimes elicits a little bit of a sharp intake of breath. No one likes the term smoke and mirrors. It's never really seen in a positive light. But what we're trying to get to here is this idea that is a media vendor actually delivering an IO? So what do we mean by that? Essentially, we do see some vendors that don't have omni-channel capabilities, that don't have technologies that are actually able to cry across these media channels that we see consumers moving across in a very fluid way daily, are actually outsourcing parts of a media buy to those who are capable of doing that. We see it as common practice, especially in, I guess, the areas that are slightly more nascent from a programmatic perspective, such as video and mobile. You really should be able to verify how each campaign will be executed to ensure that your vendor supports and can visually confirm the capabilities they are pitching are actually available to them. So can you sit and look into a report within a user interface that shows a mobile campaign that's running, that shows a video campaign that's running, or are you just getting a spreadsheet that shows delivery of clicks and impressions? There are very, very specific questions that can be addressed with vendors to ensure that the requirements that they have are being met. With this, though, we have greater clarity around setup and execution of campaigns, and it will help get past this idea of smoke and mirrors. So, looking at the bottom left box here, clients should ask ad tech and media vendors to demonstrate that they are adhering to campaign setup requirements. It will move away from the smoke and mirrors idea that you work with a vendor, but that vendor is then outsourcing to someone else, and you lose control of the overall supply chain. So, we've looked a little bit here at 4 key areas of transparency as we see it. So, price. You should really require a dynamic CPM billing model. Media, requesting full reporting and campaign access. So you start to understand really what's driving performance. The same with tactics, so that you know what is delivering against your marketing outcomes. And management, as we said, almost seems unusual, but the idea that you should be able to look into a partner's user interface, you should be able to see very, very granular reporting to show that they are controlling the campaigns that they are running, that you are not being kind of outsourced and outsourced and outsourced and losing more and more control over your media execution. Really, I think what we're saying here is that transparency is an opportunity. There are material benefits that transparency will deliver to businesses. The end-to-end understanding of the economics means that you can reduce costs and will help you deliver more results with the same budget. It enables you to recommend strategic innovation or testing ideas that budgets couldn't previously support, because to the points 2 and 3, you have that line-level understanding of what's working in your campaigns. You can start to test and learn this idea of using media as research. It all feeds into this idea that the more transparency you have, the more effectively you're able to execute. Transparency delivers, on a very basic level, more insight into performance, so optimization, again, analytics. But it puts you back in control as well. You ensure that the vendor you're working with is able to support everything you've asked them to do, that you're not losing this control of your overall supply chain, because the vendor you work with also works with the vendor who works with the vendor, and so on and so forth. And it starts to create that opacity, which really we're trying to move away from. So, In the next section, what we really wanted to do was look at some of the main challenges and issues that we have here. I think, as with most things in the industry, all challenges and issues kind of tend to fundamentally be interlinked. Issues around transparency are wider industry issues as well, so we just want to dive into those a little bit now. So we've already seen this, or talked about a little bit, this move to a digital lifestyle. Consumers are making the way consumers make their buying decisions has fundamentally changed. This is leading to segregation and siloing in some instances of data and information, which can create challenges for brands in the way they need to engage, and certainly in creating transparency around that. Consumers are very much now in the driving seat, and they're certainly taking control of the way they engage with brands. And obviously advertising is at the forefront of this. This is no more apparent than it is in advertising. We talk a lot at DataXu about a customer journey. The customer journey of today's consumer looks dramatically different from the way it did 10 years ago. Consumer behavior has changed with the advent of this digital lifestyle. And many of the sources of information used to inform purchase, from product videos to social network recommendations, all of this peer-to-peer information that we share and take on board and use to inform our daily lives, that speaks to this idea of utility that we mentioned earlier on, didn't exist 10 years ago. So this creates a number of unique challenges for marketers about greater understanding of their consumer, and marketers need tools to help them understand how consumer behavior changes depending on what device or website they're on. And a platform they adopt needs to help them engage in the most effective way, no matter what. And this, again, talks to the idea that we mentioned earlier on in the presentation about the aggregation of data and information and capabilities all within one technology. That helps create this level of transparency, both from an understanding of media execution side, but from a consumer side as well, understanding your customer on a more one-to-one basis. I think the way that we look at this is that those can adapt to this new way of working within this framework of transparency, are ultimately going to be able to leverage and extract the advantage that programmatic marketing brings to an ever-challenging world for marketers. And of course, we move into areas of viewability and brand safety. This is an area, again, that's becoming of increasing focus within the market, and understandably so. From a viewability perspective, marketers are, as we know, are continuously under pressure. They need to ensure that they're cutting out waste of their marketing expenditure, and programmatic as an overall concept is certainly helping them do that. The arrival of viewability metrics is almost the next iteration of that, where an advertiser can be billed according to whether a brand has actually been seen or whether their ad has been placed in a place that it's viewable. This speaks directly to our earlier point about having transparency over the execution of media. Without this transparency and understanding of exactly where media plans are executed, as we discussed earlier, right down to a URL level on a media plan, it's going to be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to enforce viewability metrics, measures, and standards. These standards are now currently being defined in the EU to help improve viewability, but any element of opacity around media execution is going to increase the challenges that marketers have when they're trying to meet viewability measures. We're reiterating this message that the way media is bought and exactly what is being bought is paramount. This idea of transparency will support and help grow this idea of viewability as a metric within the business. And also brand safety. We'll come on to talk about exactly what that means a little bit more. But it's really about building trust for marketers. And marketers need to know and be secure that their place that their ads are appearing is brand safe by their own definition, and that they're comfortable with ads appearing there. We are seeing new standards and practices being introduced to help create greater levels of brand safety, to help inform these ideas of where ads are appearing to ensure they're brand safe. A good example of this, and something that I would urge people to check out in this idea of brand safety, is the Digital Standards Trading Group launched by the IAB in the UK. Essentially, what this is going to do is facilitate the evaluation of brand safety processes and practices. This will be evaluated by independent third parties. So brands working in conjunction with the IAB will have a set of standards. They will communicate to a third party, and that third party will then work with a vendor to make sure that they are adhering to those standards. And a question that relates directly to transparency and kind of talks to one of the 4 pillars we mentioned earlier about what's working within a media plan is, how do you ensure media investment is driving actual response? And what we mean here is that, unfortunately, the growth of the industry and the complexity of the industry has led to fraudulent activity, whether that's fake clicks, websites, cookie bombing. All of these things are unfortunate side effects of a fast growth and complex industry that we work in. Marketers obviously need to work in conjunction with technologies, and they need a partner platform that has technical capabilities, but also the expertise to try and help combat this, because almost regularly in the trade press and questions that get asked at forums and meetings is about fraudulent activity, and there's some big numbers bandied around. So you really do need to partner with technologies that are able to identify this fraudulent activity quickly and stamp it out. Otherwise, you are really working on false metrics in terms of understanding your media execution and how successful it's been. You need a partner that can proactively seek and take action against fraudulent activity, really to clean up your media supply chain. The cleaner the supply chain, the more certain you can be of the metrics that your campaign has delivered against. DataXu obviously tried to take a lead in this area. We always work with our customers to ensure digital marketing activity is done safely and securely, and of course effectively. And this is a combination of things really. Obviously there's the use of technology that helps facilitate improvements in a lot of areas that we've talked about today. But this is also done with human review. There's an element of people having to spot fraudulent activity and making sure it's mitigated as quickly as possible. The transparency around data, we've already talked a little bit about transparency really meaning data ownership. So you as a marketer working with your agency are the owners of data, and that should only be utilized for your marketing activities. But within the industry generally, we talk and define data in different ways, and we talk about different elements of data. So just to clear up what we mean when we're discussing these points, first-party data is essentially brand-owned data. This is normally data that's collected and gathered from a brand's own website or suite of websites, and is used to inform marketing activity, and should be used really to do more than just retarget. That's almost becoming just commoditized hygiene on campaigns. We really do need to look at better and smarter ways of using first-party data. And then third-party data. This is data coming from companies that specialize in data provision, so those that are bucketing and segmenting data to create actionable segments. This can be anything from user intent data in market to purchase a new computer, in market to buy a new car, down to more simplistic data like age and demographic. But in this world that we operate in, audiences become increasingly the most important currency for the marketer. And third and first-party data can really help unlock this value for advertisers. This is obviously works in tandem and can be of assistance to publishers as well. It gives exclusive insight to audiences, and it helps advertisers assign more value to publishers' inventory. And obviously that can cause uplift and better yield management for publishers as well. And programmatic trading can kind of support all of these areas. However, a bit like big data, there's another overused expression at the moment, which is the cookie is crumbling. So how do marketers meet the challenges of potentially life after the cookie? Well, I guess the positive from our perspective is that over-reliance on cookie data is not something that you should be forced to have as a marketer. Only about 40% of consumer action is addressable to a cookie. And specifically in Europe at the moment, we are seeing that there might soon be a time where cookie data, certainly in the format that exists now, in this very, very rich format, may not be available for advertising purposes. But really, when you're partnering with a technology, you should really be asking questions around, can we find technologies that are able to decision without using these cookie-rich data sources? Can decisioning engines make decisions on thin data, things that perhaps isn't as rich as a cookie source? So this could be the time of day, day of week, even down to things like a postcode level, which can still be used to make very, very accurate decisions about media impressions. I think the point we're making here is that advanced decisioning technologies should not rely solely on cookies. We're all aware of the discussions that are being made at an EU level, or being had, sorry, at an EU level. regarding cookie data, and we need to be aware that there needs to be provision for life after that. And this is being, this really speaks to what we've discussed all the way through this presentation, this idea that the way the consumer operates has materially impacted the way that the brands need to operate. Marketers want more transparency over their marketing activity, but consumers are also demanding greater transparency over their lives with things like information around cookies. So we would strongly suggest that you look to partner with companies that are able to give you a provision for kind of life after the cookie. So I guess the synopsis that we take from all this is that the pace at which programmatic overall is growing will help support points and questions around transparency. Programmatic marketing can make sure that when using the right partner, not only are digital media campaigns executed more effectively and efficiently, but also that opacity that has previously existed in this environment is replaced by a transparent working model. This will help deliver net gains to businesses that operate utilizing this programmatic strategy and allow brands and agencies to move towards improved and better ways of working. A little bit like the automation we talked about at the top of the presentation. This is going to improve processes within those groups. But there are key things to remember, and one of those, which we've kind of come to a few points during the presentation, is you really need to find a partner that works in a transparent manner. You really need to leverage the benefits of programmatic for the advantage of you as an agency or as a brand rather than to the advantage of the vendor. And we'll open up for some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. I was just having a look at some of the questions that came in during the presentation. So the first one we have here is, where do you store your data, and how important is it to have data stored locally, i.e. in Europe?
Yeah, it's a good question. And yeah, we firmly believe that local data storage is important. So as a business, we've set up data centers to align with all of our markets. So we have data centers in Europe for European activity, in North America, and as we move into the Asia Pacific region, I'm sure we will have the capabilities there as well. So I think, yeah, it's important where data storage takes place, and it needs to align with the market locally, and we've set up that way.
Okay, great. Another one here. As we mentioned earlier, advertisers are starting to demand more transparency. So one of the solutions would be to bring programmatic in-house, but how easy is that for brands to do, and what are the main challenges that they'd be facing?
Yeah, I mean, it's, in terms of how easy it is, it's the adoption of technology really, and making sure that a brand has the capabilities in-house, the teams who are set up to run that technology. Some of the challenges are, I guess, instigating change within an organization would be the biggest one. This is a big step, and it's something that brands may still want to do in conjunction with their agency adopting a technology that they both decided is mutually beneficial to them. So the challenges, I think, from a business perspective are institutional change, so introducing that change within the company, within an organization, but there are benefits to that as well. And as much as unifying around one technology can help with the breaking down of silos, especially across marketing teams and business teams as well. I think increasingly we're seeing marketing and IT align more closely as we see the adoption of technology within marketing organizations. So standardizing around a technology within a business can certainly help facilitate that. So it can be easily done, as long as, again, we keep coming back to the same topic, you adopt the right partner, and that partner is able to help support the change within your business from technology adoption to activation.
Thank you. Also, as many brands still approach the programmatic trading as a performance mechanism, with increased transparency, do you think we'll see more of these big branding budgets shift to programmatic?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think this is being facilitated by not just display advertising, but things like video. I mean, we're seeing a significant movement of video budgets into programmatic, certainly by DataXu in the first quarter of this year. And channels like video are more normally associated with brand advertising rather than performance print advertising. But on the display side of things as well, we're starting to see display brand, in inverted commas, move into the programmatic space. And I think this is really facilitated by some of the things that we've talked about here with transparency, which obviously creates a level of comfort around moving what is traditionally the larger part of the budget into programmatic, but also this idea of analytics and insight about understanding the consumer. This is always going to help support brand activity. So moving away from what we said, which is an impressions and a CPM representing your programmatic execution, the next iteration of this market, working with the right partner, is being able to access a full suite of data, insight, and analytics around your activity to help support the shift of brand from non-programmatic to programmatic.
Okay, we've got another one coming up here. Do you think the quality of RTB inventory will improve? Achieve CPI targets is extremely difficult for all players at the moment.
Yeah. I don't think there's an issue around the quality of necessarily of RTB traffic, to use that term. I think it's more that, again, it speaks to some of the points we mentioned in the presentation. Media arbitrage is the problem. If you have a lack of visibility or transparency on the media you're buying until a halfway point and the end point of a campaign, that can be very challenging. If you're able to get visibility down to a URL level from the first day that you run a campaign, that can help support the idea that actually not everyone is selling poor quality long-tail inventory, and actually companies like ourselves are supporting the idea that programmatic decisioning can actually find and extract a lot of value from inventory sources that are out there. So it may just be that technology is being adopted that isn't buying correctly against the right inventory sources. I don't think it's necessarily the case that there's poor quality. And also the second part of that is this idea of premium inventory that we talked a little bit about. Premium is really defined more by the brand, I think, or a brand and publisher rather than a technology provider. But what we are seeing is technology providers like ourselves are able to bring to bear programmatic capabilities on private exchange media or guaranteed media as well. So there is a shift of a different type of inventory, I think, into the programmatic space that we haven't seen previously.
Okay, we have one final question here that we've got time for. Could you explain in more details how eCPM works?
Yes.
And how it gets calculated?
So what we're talking about, what we're essentially saying was that what we see from a programmatic space, from the programmatic perspective, is the cost per thousand is fixed. So when we talk about an eCPM, it's essentially the amount of impressions bought and the budget delivered against it. But what we do see is that with a fixed CPM model, the budget delivered and the impressions may not be kind of tally, so we get this margin between the two. So we work on a dynamic CPM model, so the system is buying at whatever price it sees appropriate to buy media against. The effective CPM is essentially the cost of that media plus the budget allocated to it. With a fixed CPM model, buying on one side on the dynamic CPM, charging the fixed CPM to the customer on the other side, that delta, which can sometimes be significant, as we said, of up to 50%, is sometimes going on margin or markup and doesn't deliver a lot of value for the advertiser.
Okay, so thanks again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks very much. Goodbye.